Start off with one of the an example that I came across recently, which I really love. So I've shown you here pictures of two birds. Ankita is going to launch a poll now. I'm curious to understand how many of you think these two birds are the same species or are they two different species? We'll give you all about 30 to 45 seconds to answer. I see answers coming in. It's about 18 of you say they're different species, 5 of you say they're the same. It's going up to 29 for different species. Let's wait for a bit more time. Okay, I think we have 57 people who have responded so far. It's almost going now to a 70-20 split. Um, Ankita, shall we close the poll?
Or I'll close it.
Thank you. Okay, so this is wonderful. About 67 of you answered the poll, and 70% of you said that they're different species, and 30% of you said they're the same species. I want to point out that both of you are actually right. All of you who said they're the same species are actually right. All of you who said they're different species are also right. What's fascinating is that until 2016, scientists and everyone, uh, you know, uh, the general public thought that they're the same species. These are the plain-backed thrush was the name given to both of these birds that I show you here. But after 2016, what's wonderful about, and this is what really excites me, what's wonderful about acoustics is that people couldn't really tell apart these two birds just based on looking at them. But they started digging deeper into the bird sounds that were recorded for these two birds. So here's a clip of the first bird. So it's very distinct in that clip, but let's listen to the second bird. So the first bird you heard was the new species that was described, named after Salim Ali. So it's the Himalayan thrush. And the second species is the alpine thrush. A group of scientists and naturalists actually described this based on not just morphology but primarily looking at sounds. So all of the sounds and songs that we collect and we listen to has actually helped us describe two new species. So this is a really exciting result and showcases how important it is for us to listen to birds and hear their songs. And I have been studying birds in the Western Ghats for about a decade now, and my interest in birds definitely came about when I was listening to bird calls. I first started working on birds in the Himalayas, and the Western Ghats is closer to home for me. I'm from Bangalore, and I'm going to talk to you about an example of how using bird sounds we're actually able to push the frontier for conservation and research. And then I'll tell you a bit more about how we can start recording bird calls. So let's go to the Anamalai Hills. In this particular region, the Nature Conservation Foundation, a non-profit that I collaborate with, have been restoring degraded rainforest fragments for over 25 years now. So on your left, you can see an image from 2007. That's an image of a degraded forest fragment taken then. On your right, you can see an image of the exact same fragment taken in 2024. And you'll notice that the forests have recovered in terms of habitat structure and the plants and the flora that you see. So naturally at that time, the question was, what about birds? Are birds coming back to these fragments? And around this time, I started dabbling a lot more with recording equipment that was not just handheld, but recording equipment that we could tie to trees. And these are recorders that we call passive acoustic monitors because they're just placed in one location and they passively collect data for hours and days and months at a time, in fact. And what we did was we placed audio recorders, like these tiny devices you see on the right of your screen called audio mods. We placed them in these restored forests. We also placed them in protected area sites, and we placed them in degraded forests. And we wanted to understand how many birds are present in each of these habitat types, and is restoration actually successful in bringing back birds. And here's again an image of a recorder tied to a tree in one of our sites. What's fascinating to me again about sounds is that we can not only hear them, but we can actually convert these sounds to images. And as a scientist, I often study these, what we call as spectrograms, which are simply signatures of these sounds. And I'm going to play an audio clip of this very same spectrogram you see here. And you carefully listening to them, we are able to figure out that there's a pulvetta there, there's a racket-tailed drongo there, and in the background you're hearing gray-headed canary flycatchers, and you're also hearing crimson-backed sunbirds at slightly higher frequency. And I think why I illustrate this is because it's really changed the way we do research, the way we actually not only listen to sounds, but we're actually able to visualize them. And the fascinating part about this research, by recording all of these sounds for months at a time in these habitat types, this is what we found. This is what a degraded forest sounds like. Can you hear something? If you're not hearing anything, you're right, because you're often not hearing too many bird species from these habitats. You're seeing a lot of birds that love edges of forests and don't really are not very particular about the kind of habitat they need to be in, like tailor birds, like chestnut-headed bee-eaters. But when we started recording sounds in restored forests, we started hearing a lot more rainforest birds. So you again heard the racket-tailed drongo, but what was really unique about and was a positive result that we encountered was that the birds actually returning to these restored habitat types, and that restoration was in fact successful in bringing back these species. But I think it's important to emphasize that compared to protected area sites, this is what we hear. And I want to point out here that we hear birds like the great hornbill and Malabar trogon, and many exclusive rainforest specialists that are often sort of hard to that still take forever to come back to restored sites. But more importantly, what this result is telling us is that when we do have pristine habitat, the first thing we want to do is continue protecting them, and the second step that we take is restore degraded habitats, because it takes over 50 to 100 years for these habitats to return to what they once were. Right, so I hope I've given you a brief flavor of how we use bird sounds in our research, but I think again it's important to emphasize why we record bird sounds, right? And I hope I've given you a flavor of that we're able to get at natural history, like very interesting questions that make us all curious, right? Like, why do some birds sing more at dawn? Or do female birds sing? And do these songs have different meanings? And none of this is possible without the recordings that all of you collect, and all of us collect. And at BirdCout India, and as a scientist at the Lab of Ornithology, we're very interested in bird monitoring as well, right? We're interested in how can we track bird populations using sounds, using observations to prevent their declines? How can we better understand questions like noise pollution? How does that impact birds? Or what about migratory birds? When do they come to India? When do they leave? But more importantly for me, I also think that it's important for us to record sounds to inspire the next generation of bird watchers and citizen scientists. Because as we're able to collect more and more bird sounds, we're able to better understand the natural world. Now I'm going to move ahead and let's get into the meat of the workshop where let's talk a bit about how do you start recording bird sounds. So here's an image of different equipment that we use. I think for now, let's start first with the easiest of, the most accessible of the three uh, that's shown here, which is our phones. And multiple reasons for using phones, right? One is they're very highly practical across locations, easy to carry, easy to take to any of the sites that you go birding. Useful for quickly documenting what species is present. You're on your phone, you are doing an eBird checklist, and you can quickly use a recording app and then record whatever's present. It's very useful to record bird sounds. I use it quite often when I don't carry my recording equipment. But the caveat is that sometimes high quality recordings are not always possible with smartphones. And that's a trade-off with carrying these devices. Right? Now, I think a question that I'm often asked is, what recording app should I use when I use my smartphone? The first thing that I always say is that use a recording app that allows you to create WAV files, and I'll tell you why WAV file formats are far superior compared to other formats. Use apps that give you some manual control over settings. I often say you don't have to change the settings far too much, but if you use an app that allows you to change sometimes the sampling rate, allows you to vary the gain, that's often useful. I'll tell you a bit more about that shortly. At the Macaulay Library for iOS, the Rode Rec and the Voice Record Pro app are recommended. And don't worry about keeping track of this. All of these slides will be accessible to you after this presentation, and it's also recorded. For Android, two apps that they recommend are the RecForge 2 and the Hi-Res audio recording app. Personally, I use the Dolby On app. I found it very useful. It's the quality of audio is really great because I use it both for making voice notes, but I also use it for recording bird calls. Sometimes if the bird is a little further away, say even over 40 or 50 meters, it does a pretty good job at capturing the signal from those birds with limited background noise. But yeah, there's a bunch of apps out there, so feel free to figure out what works best for you. Right, coming back to why we suggest WAV files. So on your left, you can see a typical smartphone recording. So often it's in the format of an M4A. And on your right, you see an uncompressed wave recording. And I think the good thing about choosing wave formats is sometimes if you have birds that often vocalize at slightly medium to high frequencies. So let's take the example of, say, sunbirds or flycatchers, for example. If you're using your smartphone recording with an M4A setting or any other setting other than wave, this is what we call a lossy setting because you're losing some quantity and some crucial information. So for many of these medium to high frequency vocalizing birds, the highest of their frequencies may get clipped off. And so you might be losing some of that information, which is why we often recommend that using wave will get you all the information that's actually coming from the bird. Right, I was telling you a bit about app settings. I won't dig too much into it, but I'll just briefly talk about like the key aspects that we should keep in mind. Again, try to select wave format if it allows you. I also suggest that choose a particular sampling rate of 48 or 44 kilohertz, and not going too much into the nitty-gritties or the jargon or the terminology. It's simply the number of samples per second that are being recorded. It's a way for us to, if you think about it this way, if it's 48 kilohertz, often you're capturing frequencies anywhere from 0 to 24,000. So most of the bird species will be captured in that range. Now, if you go, say your sampling rate was somewhere around 24 kilohertz, you'll only capture between 0 to 12,000 hertz. So very high frequency calling birds like, I think of brown-breasted flycatcher, and like you're probably missing that whistle completely. So choosing a sample rate like this does a good trade-off of capturing the entire spectrum. Bit depth, again, it's the amount of information that we're getting. 16 or 24 bits is often recommended for getting all of that, all of the information. The other thing we also say is mic gain settings. This, of course, applies not just to smartphones if your app allows you, but also to other equipment that I'll come to shortly. I think what the gain refers to is not the volume. It's essentially a way for us to amplify the signal that's coming to the microphone. So if you are trying to capture the vocalization of a purple sunbird that you're able to see, by increasing the gain a little bit, you're able to amplify that signal that's coming into your microphone. And the more and more, it's of course a scale that goes from negative to positive. The more you go to positive, you are amplifying it so much that sometimes you'll only hear often even tiny movements that you make. So there's a trade-off here, and all of this information is also available on the Macaulay website. But for our webinar, I think just keep in mind that when you're changing that setting on your recording devices, don't go above -3 or -4 dB. Just don't hit 0 decibel essentially. And I'm happy to answer more questions about this towards the end of the webinar. Right. Okay. Important question. How long should you record? Longer recording, highly valuable. And I say this from experience. Last year I was recording Malabar Woodshrike, and I started hearing not the typical song of the Malabar Woodshrike, but like a weird sort of like a begging call. And as I started observing, I started noticing that it was probably a juvenile making that vocalization. But I was lucky because I had my recording equipment on. It was continuously recording, and all I had to do was point the microphone to the in the right direction. The idea is that the longer that the recording you have more valuable rare recordings. That being said, just because you have a 10-second recording, don't toss it out. If that's all you can get, that's still valuable information. And when I first started recording, I think I would initially start by doing 20-second recordings or 30-second recordings and slowly, move to 1 minute or 2 minutes. Once I was more comfortable with holding the equipment, pointing it at the right direction, etc. So I would say don't toss out any of your short recordings. Yeah, and as I mentioned earlier, the idea here is that it really increases your chance of recording a rare vocalization of behavior. And I think that's wonderful to document from a natural history standpoint. What if we want higher quality recordings that using better microphones, right? And so let's talk a bit about some of the more specialized equipment now. The idea with this higher quality or specialized equipment is that it's directional. So rather than capturing all the background noise around you, you're amplifying sound from a specific direction, and it's better for isolating a target or like one focal species if there's a lot of sounds that you can hear around it. And as many of you might know, there are often two main types of directional mics. One is a shotgun microphone. The other is a parabolic reflector or a parabola. I'll briefly talk about both. This is an example of how a shotgun microphone is capturing all the audio that's coming to it. So it's often like a tiny cylinder of sorts that you'll be holding in your hand, and you have sounds that's coming from the direction you're pointing it at, but also a slightly larger radius. It's not highly directional. The advantage, it's easy to use, it's portable, and it's definitely much more affordable compared to your parabolic microphones. But the caveat is that the directionality is not super high. That being said, the other one is the parabola, highly directional. Here you can see two images. One, you can see an image of how directional it is on the top, where here Jay McGovern is pointing it at the bird on the tree there. And the bottom image you can see is that the parabolic reflector is uniquely shaped so that all of the signals that are coming within the radius of the parabola is being reflected back into the microphone at the center. So it's highly, highly directional. Only a disadvantage is that it is large, can be cumbersome, and of course, as I mentioned earlier, if you're just starting off recording birds, you're really interested in recording birds, I would say start off with shotgun microphones, and then if you're really keen on getting parabolic microphones, I would say by all means go ahead and do it. The only catch is that it's a little more expensive to begin with. So. Yeah, and the other thing about parabolic microphones, it requires a little more practice because sometimes you're amplifying signals a lot more, so you have to play around a bit more with the mic gain that you have before you can point it at the subject. And I want to give you an example of shotgun mics and parabolas. Here's a recording of the hooded warbler taken at the very same time by someone holding a shotgun microphone and a parabolic one. Let me play the shotgun microphone recording first. So it's fairly clear, right? Let's play the parabolic microphone and you'll notice a visible and an aural difference when you hear the same vocalization. Okay, I think all of you must have noticed that the background, if you look at the two spectrograms right now, you can see the background has a bit more noise that's coming in for a shotgun microphone, but for a parabola, since it's aimed exactly at the bird species, you can also see that there are very few other background vocalizations that are being captured. So this is one of the key advantages, and bird recorders who are really, really keen on recording the signal of that particular bird species highly often recommend a parabolic microphone. All right. Now I'm going to talk about the fact that for both of these, I think the only thing that you should keep in mind is you need accessories sometimes. So you're often needing multiple batteries, headphones because you're connecting your headphone to the recorder, and you're often listening to the sounds that are coming in, and accordingly you vary your gain before you start the recording, etc. This is just something to keep in mind that unlike a smartphone, these are additional accessories that you need for both the shotgun microphone and the parabolic microphone. But a compromise is that these days I've noticed that many birders use a compromise of connecting a shotgun microphone to a smartphone. So you're not carrying very bulky equipment when you go birding. You have your smartphone. All you need is an adapter, and it's a very good compromise in terms of getting the entire setup versus recording calls that you want to record without carrying too much. The only thing I'll mention here is that I have had problems, and when I have been using my phone and I have my recorder on, and then I go back home and then I'm looking at my audio recording, I hear some sort of an interference. Sometimes when you get messages on your phone, that interferes with the signal that's coming into the microphone. So if you are able to use airplane mode when you're recording. I learned this the hard way after I got a really good recording of a brown-breasted flycatcher and there was interference throughout. So definitely recommend using airplane mode. All right. Before you start recording, how can you prepare? Like before you go to the field, what are things that you can do? One, make sure if you're carrying equipments like shotgun microphones or parabolas, make sure you have enough battery and memory disk space. If possible, take spare batteries. The other thing I'll say is that sometimes what I've done is that I've carried a power bank with me, and I've connected that to the recorder. I think sometimes people have had mixed experiences with that, because if you're not getting enough charge that's coming to the recorder, sometimes the signal that you're receiving to the microphone would have some interference. So many people often recommend taking standard AA batteries or the batteries that you require for your recorder, but carrying a power bank is also a compromise, and it's worked really well for me. Test your equipment beforehand. So yeah, definitely, test it at home, record things to figure out how to hold it, what distance, etc. And I'll tell you a bit more about that shortly. But importantly, let's say you're going birding tomorrow morning. Before you go birding Saturday morning, what locations are you going to record in? Is it going to be too noisy? Will it rain? These are important things to consider, especially if you're carrying equipment, because if it's going to rain a lot, you might want to carry appropriate, not just gear to protect your recorders, because it is expensive equipment, but also is it going to be too windy? Do you need a wind mount in those areas? If it's an open area like the image you're seeing, you might need a wind mount. If it's not a very open area, maybe you don't need it. So these are things that you may want to think about before you go recording the next day. All right, now you are at your location where you're birding, and what should you keep in mind when you start recording? First and foremost, try to get as close to the subject as possible. So by that I mean as close to the bird as possible without disturbing it, of course. But the closer you get, naturally the signal distance is going to be reduced. So you're going to get a higher quality recording. And as I mentioned earlier, turn on your recorder and be ready for any opportunity for recording these birds. So keep the recorder on, and when you're hearing it through your, through your headphones, or let's say your smartphone app is on and you're suddenly hearing a bird species, if it's on, you're already recording what's coming out, and all you need to do is point it at the right subject in the right direction. Yeah, when you're in a group, I have noticed it's often useful to tell others you're recording. So I often say, okay, recording a crimson-back sunbird now. And everyone would be quiet for the duration that you're recording, so that you're not getting too many human voices in your recording. Very important. I've noticed often many of us, when we start recording, you're often just holding the microphone, for at least shotgun microphones or parabolas, not necessarily knowing where exactly the subject is. So this is similar to the advice that you get when you start birding, right? Like when you're first trying to observe a bird using your binoculars, people often say, look at the bird first and then use your binoculars to aim at it. Similarly, try to identify where the subject is, point your microphone, simply because you'll have a better chance of getting a good recording. Yeah, goes without saying, try to hold the recording with minimal movement. This comes with practice. After a while, your hand is hurting. So it just comes with practice, when you go birding and you're recording. Yeah, be quiet again while you're recording. Try to reduce the amount of movement. Try to, not walk when you're recording. So you're not, making those rustling noises or any movements any noises that your shoe is making as it touches the ground. And yeah, the other thing I'll say is make an announcement at the end of the recording. This is useful information because it's information that you're telling yourself also, that this is the bird you recorded, this is where you recorded it, what was the habitat, was it raining that day, was it super windy, and I can tell you a little bit more shortly. And yeah, again, reiterating briefly, record for at least a minute, ideally longer. If it's short, that's fine, but try to try to sort of have a goal for recording at least a minute. All right, I'm going to move sections soon and stop, giving you sets of advice, and we can talk a bit more about bigger picture, what you do with your audio. But the last thing I'll say is during or after recording is, make voice announcement. So you can even point the recorder to yourself and make an announcement. Sometimes I'm using my phone and I just point it and say that okay, recorded brown cheek fulvetta today, or in an open field here, or something like that. With as much information as possible. Sometimes I say this is the exact location, date, time. Sometimes I write it down in my recording itself. So if I'm using a smartphone or a microphone, I quickly note down what location I recorded it in. Some name that you would give to that location, but come back later when you go home and you can, process that. Any other information, like recording equipment, and we'll talk about this briefly later. I'm going to switch gears now and talk a bit big picture, right? I think this is one of the coolest things and one of the most exciting things as a scientist and as someone who's fallen in love with birds to see is eBird. Right? And today on eBird we have over 2.1 billion bird observations, and all of that is made possible because of citizen scientists like yourselves. Like all of the observations that you make have led to this image that you see here. Um, we have over 1 million people reporting observations on checklists, and this has helped us not just for research but for conservation and for anything and everything in between that. And it's truly amazing because this is the world's largest citizen science database. And the image you see here is not an image of the world at night. These are not night lights, right? These are just, all of these are dots, all of these are checklists that you've all contributed, and they've all been superimposed on this image, and you literally see a map of the world. How cool is that? And India is one of the largest contributors to eBird. You can see how brightly lit India is compared to the rest of the world. So thank you again for making all of your contributions to eBird. It's really helped not just research but also conservation, and for us to learn more about birds around us. And I think many of us know about this, but for those of you who are new to birding, I think the Lab of Ornithology makes free tools available to all birders. There are two main products. One is Merlin, which we think of it as a learning tool and as a way for us to engage with nature. The other is eBird, which is a reporting tool. Let's talk a bit about Merlin because we are in a acoustic session today. There are two amazing things about Merlin. Merlin has a bird ID, and this is essentially a free field guide. Right? You can download this app on your phone, and you can look up any bird species. One of my favorite birds here that I'm showing you, the great hornbill, and you can quickly see recordings that a citizen scientist made from India, and you can hear what the grunts of the hornbill sound like, and you can also learn a bit more about the map of where the bird species is found. But the other amazing thing about Merlin that has really blown people's minds since 2021 is Merlin Sound ID. As soon as you open your Merlin app, the central button there, when you click on it and you go out birding, it's telling you all the bird species that it can hear, and it is able to determine using AI and machine learning. And I think this is really fascinating, and I'll tell you a bit more about how this works. What's amazing is that while we have over 10,000 bird species in the world, Merlin Sound ID now covers over 2,000 bird species. And India is a big contributor, and given the number of species we have in India, we have almost, I would say, about 40% of the bird species that are represented in Merlin. And I'll tell you a bit about how well it works as well, and what we can do to improve it together. And I think it's important for everyone to understand how Merlin Sound ID works. So let's take the example of an audio recording. Here we're looking at a spectrogram of the purple-rumped sunbird that we all hear in most cities in India. Right? Now, in the background, how Merlin processes the audios that you provide is we first annotate that audio, and what that means is essentially drawing boxes around where the signals of that audio is seen. So the red boxes you see here are essentially drawn by a human observer using Merlin's platform called Merlin Vision, which I'll tell you shortly about. And once those boxes are drawn around that particular signal, it goes through the process of machine learning, and here the model is essentially learning what the vocalization of the sunbird looks like, and using hundreds and hundreds of images and examples from across India, it's then fed into your phone, and when you start recording, it will tell you that there's a purple rump sunbird. And it feels like magic, but I think it's pretty amazing in terms of what goes in the background. And again, I think it's really important to emphasize none of this would be possible without contributions of audio from birders like yourselves. Like it would be impossible to create Merlin Sound ID. Right, so the second part of it, right, just to give you a bit more of a sneak peek of how this works, Merlin Vision is essentially a tool for creating those boxes and for training the model, which is Merlin Sound ID. And it's essentially on a platform that can be accessed through your browsers. And here I'm showing an example of the Blythe-reed warbler. And what the Merlin team and the Macaulay Library at BirdCout India would ask birders is to draw boxes around where that species is found. So for example, here you can see an example recording of the Blythe-reed warbler and a box drawn around where the reed warbler's vocalization is. But there are also boxes drawn around other species that they can identify, like the barbet or the house crow. To learn more about how to interact with Merlin Vision and how you can be involved, please do get in touch with BirdCount India and the team at Macaulay Library. If you'd love to, draw these boxes, we do need more annotations of these so that we can improve models for several species. Right. So the other thing I'll say is that there needs to be at least 100 examples per species to cover all the variation that you see across the country or across the areas where the species is found to train the model. That's like a typical benchmark that the Merlin Sound ID team uses before they train their models. All right. Now, I think it's important to look at this graph. Let's look at the contributions that's coming from our country. So these are number of photos and audios archived via Macaulay Library starting from 2015. And you can see that there are over almost 4 million photos that have been submitted by all of you. But while there are so many audio files that are already archived in Macaulay, there is a tremendous opportunity here for us to help not only improve Merlin Sound ID, but also record bird sounds around us, and to answer more about natural history, research, conservation, everything in between that. Right? So there's a wonderful gap here that can be filled by more of us going out there and recording with our phones, with our microphones or parabolas. Now, what often you might ask me, okay, I've gone to the field, I've gone birding, now I've recorded on my phone, what do I do with it? And what the next step often involves is archiving your audio in Macaulay Library. And I say Macaulay Library because Macaulay Library is the world's largest database for nature sounds. It was started in the 1920s, and since then, this archive has grown tremendously across the planet and has the world's largest database of sounds of birds. And now it's open to not just birds, but sounds of habitats, sounds of other species. And it's truly a wonderful resource for people to engage with and learn more about what different birds look like, what different birds sound like. All right, so let's talk briefly about how you can archive your audio in the remaining time that I have here. I think the first thing that you start is when you go out birding. I encourage everyone to enter your observations using eBird. So you have your eBird app open. You are documenting the birds that you're seeing. You see a white-cheeked barbet there, and you enter white-cheeked barbet 1, and then you switch on your phone recording, and then you start recording that. Right? Once you're done, submit your checklist to eBird. Also, as I mentioned earlier throughout this presentation, use best recording practices to collect your audio for the bird species that you've observed or the bird species you recorded. Now, let's go back home And then the first thing we'll do is download the audio from your phone or your equipment to your computer. And again, don't worry about noting all of this down. All of these slides will be made available to you. Just want to walk you through the simple steps that are involved after you record. It's very minor steps. So the first thing you do is download it from your phone or your equipment, and then we can use open and free softwares like Ocean Audio and Audacity. They're very useful for editing your audio. We ask everyone to not edit the audio too much, very minimal editing, but there's just one key step that's involved in the editing that needs to be done before you archive it on Macaulay Library. And Macaulay Library has a bunch of detailed instructions on editing, which will be updated soon. So please wait for about 2 weeks. There's going to be a big update that's going to come soon, and that will reduce the editing even more. So the only thing I'll mention here for editing is that here's an example. There's an example of one bird that we're going to focus on here, and what usually goes on in the process of editing. So you can see on the leftmost corner is some handling noise. I moved my microphone a little bit. So there's that noise that comes when I initially start recording, or when I took my phone out of my pocket and press the on button. So you're going to trim that section. You're going to keep everything in between. Now you'll notice that at seconds 24 to 26, I've moved my phone a little bit. There's still some noise, but don't remove it, because it'll then remove some more of the actual bird signal. Keep it. And then you'll see that there's more handling noise in the end, but there's no bird call from 38 seconds to 48 seconds. Just get rid of it altogether. We often say keep a little bit of a buffer between the start of the vocalization and when you hit record. It's just good recording practices. And yeah, that's about it. That's all you need to do. You basically are trimming the audio. Earlier, there was a process of what we call normalizing, but that is going to go away completely. Macaulay Library is going to carry out automated normalizing for you in about 2 weeks. So just worry about trimming the file, but most importantly, save and ensure you export it as a WAV file. And again, the settings that I mentioned earlier, save it as 24 bits and at 44 or higher sampling rate. Now you've saved your recording and you've named it appropriately. You have, let's take an example of my favorite bird, the brown-cheeked fulvetta, one of my favorite birds. Now, the first thing is, did you submit just do a check again. Did you submit your checklist using eBird? If it's not yet submitted, go back to your phone, hit submit on that checklist, and then go to your browser and open the eBird website and look at your eBird checklist. So I'm going to show you an example of one of my eBird checklists here. This is what it looks like before I've added media. Now you see a button called Add Media there. Go to your checklist, click on the Add Media button. Once you've clicked the Add Media button, you'll see a portal that opens up like this. These days you'll see something on top as well which says Checklist Media, which has habitats, experience other animals, so you can basically add other media as well. But essentially you click the Add Media button and you're able to add all the recordings for that corresponding species. So I've added a bunch of recordings for the Malabar flameback here. And once that's done, hit done. And this is what it looks like on my checklist. Right? You can hit Manage Media again to basically verify whether you need to change something. Like for example, I forgot to provide information on behavior of that bird or something more about that recording. You can add that information. And that's it. Congrats. You basically archived it successfully on Macaulay Library. So you not only are able to see it through your eBird checklist, now it's on Macaulay Library for everyone to see and hear your recording. At the moment, the only way to add media is through the eBird checklist. That's the way it's been designed. Once you submit your observations, the developers at eBird and Merlin encourage you to submit your media through your eBird checklist, and it goes to Macaulay Library to be archived. All right. Now I'm going to, in the last few minutes of this webinar, before I stop talking, I'm going to briefly take a step back and talk a bit about the India Ecoacoustics Network. I think over the last 5 to 6 years of studying and using bird sounds to do research, we realized that there's a big and growing community of not just researchers but conservation practitioners, uh, citizen scientists, government officials, and anyone who's basically interested in asking what is that sound, what is that bird species, or just generally curious about what sounds we hear around us. So, with that motivation in mind, we kickstarted this community platform for anyone who's interested in using sounds to study and engage with nature in India. And uh, the one of the motivations to kickstart this was we sent out a survey asking how would you describe your level of experience with acoustics. We had almost 500 responses, and you'll see here is that over 50% say that they have lower experience with acoustics. So there's clearly a big gap here in how we can engage with a large audience to introduce them to how we can, not just use sounds to study, but also engage with nature. And this is how we got started with creating a community platform for anyone interested in using sounds to monitor, protect, and better understand, India's biodiversity. It's not just for birds, but for any nature sounds. And today it's been really wonderful because we've been able to not just build capacity. So if people are interested in, okay, how do I use this equipment? There are 10 people on a WhatsApp group or email listserv telling you that this is what worked best for me. It's like a great support group for people learning from one another, but it's also moved the research forward. Uh, but the best part is it's moved research forward with not just researchers. That's the best part about this network is that we've been able to involve everyone who's interested in recording sounds, not just researchers, but citizen scientists and the general public, and everyone is actually engaged in that research. And for the last 2 years now, we've been able to do multiple uh, introduction meetings and engagement meetings to learn from each other about what you do when you record sounds. We've had research spotlights from experienced scientists who talk about how they use sounds in their study. A lot of the workshops, like the one that we do, that I've been doing today, or workshops or talks that have been provided by different people, are publicly accessible through a YouTube channel. And it's amazing to see this network of over 500 members and counting. So if any of you are interested in joining us, please, use this QR code and it'll send you a link to a Luma page where you can go to the bottom and click on an IEN member intake form. But yeah, we'd love for more people to join us and, learn from one another. The last thing I'll say here is that, again, coming back to Merlin Sound ID, has less than 46% of Indian bird species, data for 46% of Indian bird species. And when you use Merlin Sound ID, you might get a notification on your phone saying that it works well for less than 60% of species, right? That's because we don't have enough data for a lot of these. And again, what was amazing about the India Ecoacoustics Network was that this came about as a natural conversation that, hey, how do we help build better models for biodiversity? And so that, we're able to not only improve models like Merlin Sound ID, but also help research for other species. And that way, we got started by building India's first open access data set of annotations of these boxes that I was talking about through Merlin Vision. And over 8 months and 70 plus contributors for all wildlife, this is what we have right now. And it's truly amazing to see the contributions that we've got from people. We have recordings from all over India. There are still gaps that you can clearly see for parts of central India and parts of northeast India. And but it's been fascinating for people who volunteer to provide their recordings, and we're all coming together and writing a research publication out of it. And I think it's been a superb experience. And this is again to emphasize why a participatory approach in involving everyone can truly help us better monitor India's biodiversity. And one last thing I'll say is that through this process, right, it's been so organic. One India Ecoacoustics member I want to highlight is Nishant Bhagwat. We were initially talking about all the audio that people were sending us, and we were wondering, okay, how do we ensure that all of the annotations are accurate. Can we, do some validation? Can we test them? And he was like, don't worry about it. I can build a tool and I can help you do it. And he built this tool literally in like 1 week. And again, this is just goes to show how we can learn from each other in terms of the different expertise that we have. I am not a software engineer. I am an ecologist, but working with someone like Nishant, we were able to build something like this together, and now we're able to validate the data that's been coming in. And we're excited to see what more we can do with more of you joining us. With that, I'm going to briefly summarize my webinar and say I hope I've given you a flavor of why we should record bird sounds, how we're able to better understand the natural history around us, how do you record, a few tips and suggestions on what you can do in terms of best recording practices. I've talked to you briefly about eBird and Merlin Sound ID and how the data you are archiving on Macaulay Library is helping us create a better version of Merlin Sound ID. And more importantly, why it's important to create a participatory network like the India Ecoacoustics Network for all of us to come together for our shared love and knowledge of using sounds to learn more about nature around us. With that, I want to acknowledge again facilitators and collaborators at BirdCon India, Mittal and Ankita. Thank you so much. Scientists and colleagues at the Macaulay Library and everyone at the India Ecoacoustics Network. Thank you, and I'm happy to take questions.
Hi Vijay, thanks so much for that very nice presentation. We definitely learned a lot from you. So we are running a bit short of time, so I'll be able to ask very few questions here. But Aarti Singh is asking, what is a wind mount and how does it help?
Yeah, great question, Ati. So wind mount is essentially like a cover that often people put around their shotgun microphones. So it's essentially to reduce the amount of wind-based interference. So if it's a really windy day, having uh, a specific cover around your shotgun microphone or your parabola sometimes can really help reduce that level of noise that's coming from wind. Yeah.
Thanks. One of the more popular questions is sometimes there's a lot of background noise that happens when you're recording a bird call. Um, to what amount is a background noise okay to be uploaded, and what can we do to reduce it?
I would say that sometimes you just can't prevent the background noise that you get when you're in a noisy situation or suddenly there's like a gust of wind. You can't help it. I think the key steps that you're able to take as long as you're trimming the audio to contain minimal background noise before the vocalization starts and after the vocalization ends is great. But from a Merlin Sound ID training perspective, I think it's completely okay for some background noise to be there in the recording. So don't worry too much about it if you have quite a bit. But if the species is there, please go ahead and upload it. It's fine.
Another question was, how does uh, uploading these audio recordings directly help in conservation?
Sorry, could you repeat the first part?
How does uploading these audio recordings, how does it help in conservation?
Yeah, no, great question. I so I think over the last 10 years or so now, Macaulay Library has been used quite a bit for research and conservation across the planet. In fact, I started off this webinar by giving you that first example of two species that were recently uh, discovered, right? Or determined as two different species. And I think that wouldn't have been possible without recordings that have been submitted by observers like yourselves. Um, in many cases, people have noticed rare observations of birds present in Macaulay Library, and that's really helped us, better understand where these birds are found and and help us better monitor them. From a conservation standpoint, there have been a number of examples where we've been able to use these recordings, and even if there are like say less than 20 recordings for a rare species, we've been able to build automated classifiers and we've been able to use that data to actually create like a conservation action plan for several species. And I'm happy to tell you more about that. But all of the data that's being submitted on Macaulay is highly, highly valuable for both research and conservation.
Okay, thanks so much, Vijay. Unfortunately, we're really running out of time. But if anyone has any more questions, please feel free to email him. I will put his email, I will share his email in the chat box. And Mithil has a couple of things to tell us before we end.
Yes, just give me a moment. I'll just share my screen. And yeah. So, first of all, thank you so much, Vijay. It was a wonderful webinar, and thank you for sharing your time, your expertise, and these practical insights on recording bird sounds. And thanks, Ankita, for co-hosting. Ankita has been helping with this webinar. She's been doing all the behind-the-scenes work and made sure the session happens. Many birders, many people like you and me attending this webinar, even those who may not use eBird regularly, we all use Merlin. And what makes Merlin work is the generosity of amazing birders like you who have shared their recordings over the years. When we record bird sounds for ourselves, we upload them, and in a small, meaningful way, we these recordings help new birders to learn. And a sound from your, balcony. Hello?
Mithil, sorry to interrupt. Are you sharing your screen because we can't see it?
Oh, okay. Just a minute. Is it visible now?
No, it is not.
Can you see it now?
Yeah, it's visible now.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was saying that all of us use Merlin, even those who are not regular eBirders, they still use Merlin. They enjoy birds, and Sound ID has really been an amazing feature. People just use Sound ID. They use the Photo ID feature. And as birders, I think it feels great that if the sounds and the photos that we have uploaded is being used for other birders or other enthusiasts to learn from it. So everyone on this call, I hope it has inspired you to go out and contribute by start contributing by recording calls. And before we wrap up, I just wanted to briefly tell you that this webinar was part of the Great Backyard Bird Count, which is happening in February. Those who are new to this event, this is a global event which happens every February over 4 days with a weekend in between. And it's a celebration of birds. And since 2013, India has been participating in this global event. So all of you who have never participated before, or even if you have participated in the previous events, please visit the website. There are various ways you can participate. You can go birding on your own. You can join a birding group, or you can even organize an event. And if you are living, studying, or working in a campus, there is also campus bird count. The participation is very simple. Go out, watch birds, and at least spend 15 minutes in the field to watch birds, record what you see in eBird app, and upload to eBird. So all the lists made during these 4 days will contribute towards this event. And not just that, we want more people to get connected with birds. And this event is no less than a festival. So please get as many new people as you can and connect them to birds. So thanks everyone for joining. We will soon make this recording available on the Bird Count India's YouTube channel. Thanks Vijay, thanks Ankita, thanks to all the participants, all the viewers who were able to keep some time out and attend this webinar.
Uh, Mithil, I just want to jump in and say, if there are people who still have questions and want it to be answered, I'm happy to stick around. I don't have a problem. I know there are a bunch of comments in the chat saying questions have remained unanswered, so I'm happy to answer them if
Yes,
you know. Yeah.
sure. Sure. Are you able to see the Q&A and the chat to take questions, or do you want us to read it out to you?
I can see the Q&A. Yeah, no problem at all.
Cool. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the first one was how to differentiate between plain-backed and Himalayan thrush by morphology, and the other one also is sound call. So I think the first two questions, just answering them briefly, is that I think the right now for determining whether a bird is a new species or not, it's not just, we don't use just one method, so it's often both morphology, genetics, and sounds. In the case of plain-backed and Himalayan thrush, of course, even the expert naturalists found it hard to differentiate by morphology, but now with the audio data and genetic data, they have a distinctive understanding that they're both different species. There's a question on, do you remove background noise? I know we tackled that briefly. How do you record with a mobile in crowded places where the vehicle noise is very high, even on early mornings? That is a hard one. Yeah, that is tricky. You know, sometimes I do want to record a bird and there's a lot of traffic noise going. It's difficult. Sometimes I try to find a window when before, you know, like say 30 seconds before the next vehicle passes. It is very hard, you know. In those cases, at times using a parabola gives you very directional, you know, data. So sometimes it sort of like attenuates some of the background noise. But with a mobile phone, I would say it's sort of hard to avoid. Yeah, that's difficult. We spoke about wind mounts. Recommendations for both kinds of mics. I think one thing I'll say is that the Macaulay Library website has an entire list of recommendations of different kinds of microphones for both shotgun and parabolic microphones. So I would definitely recommend you to take a look at it. XLR cable, again, I think the website has some recommendations of XLR cables that you can use. Please do take a look at it. Owl calls in a better way. That's again a difficult one in the sense that because sometimes it's hard to determine where exactly the individual bird is sitting on the tree and you're recording these owl calls. In those cases, what has helped me in the past is keeping the recorder on at all times. So at least, you know, like as soon as the call comes, I am still recording that in my phone or my microphone, and then I can go back later and trim that audio like what I was showing you. I think that's probably the best way. But again, these days as researchers, we have been using those passive acoustic monitoring devices where for us at least it's easier to leave the recorder there, come back, and then, you know, after 3 months, we know where the audio is and we can we can figure out where that species is. The other question about annotations also crowdsourced. What about quality control? I'm assuming, Prasad, you're referring to annotations on Merlin Vision. I think at the moment, the Merlin Vision, and again, this is where I encourage you to reach out to BirdCount India as well. There are about, on my understanding, about 10 to 15 participants so far who have been annotating those boxes. They do encourage that participants and volunteers who would love to annotate data go through a simple exercise of like a small quiz. So they'll give you like a small quiz and how well you annotate it, and accordingly, you know, you can go ahead and annotate that data. Sorry. But to your second question about quality control, some of the Merlin Vision annotations are of course checked again by sometimes just the way eBird regional reviewer process works. So sometimes they're double checked, but that doesn't mean 100% it's error free. There is bound to be certain errors. Megha's question about Merlin doesn't recognize calls of house crow and large-bill crow. Yeah, no, I agree. It's you know, this is the case where, you know, AI still needs to better learn how to differentiate these two species, because the spectral signatures to our human ear, we are able to an expert ear, you're able to understand, okay, that's a large-bill crow, that's a house crow. But I think it's not about the number of recordings. I think it's just that the model still isn't good enough for these species. It still needs to pick out different variation that exists between these two, and hopefully that will help improve the model. This is my understanding of how some of these models work. So, and this is the same case for other birds, like drongos, for example. I don't fully think that the model does a good job of telling me whether it's a ashy drongo, or sorry, for example, racket-tailed drongo or a bronze drongo. Right? Good session for shotgun mics. Again, I would recommend looking at that, the link that's already posted in the chat. We spoke about how this really helps us for conservation, and trust me, it really has helped not just BirdCon India, but researchers everywhere better understand birds and how they're being impacted by a lot of external and anthropogenic changes. How reliable is BirdNet? I think there are a bunch of questions about BirdNet. Right, so BirdNet is again, to those of you who are not aware, BirdNet is basically a research tool that is an open access tool where you can submit your audio, and it's a deep learning algorithm that processes your audio and tells you what species is present. So now the problem with BirdNet is there is no way for us to completely determine how well it works for different bird species unless you are able to do a human validation. So it is really species by species specific. So for example, I can tell you that I can trust BirdNet when it comes to white-cheeked barbet. But can I trust it when it comes to bronze drongo and racket-tailed drongo? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on the location. It depends on how well we have tested it. So there is a bunch of processes that we have to go through in order to determine how reliable it is. And that is something we want to talk about in part 2 of this webinar series. Recommended start and stop dB level for bird sound recording. Yeah, so good question again. I think on your phone sometimes, on your microphone you start sometimes at -15, -12. Keep going low to, I would say stop at -3, -4. Beyond that, sometimes you may encounter clipping. If you're using a microphone recorder, you might notice that as long as you're not going into the red zone when you increase the gain, you're fine. Reducing background noise, again, I think another question about how we process background noise. I think, there are tools to process it, but we strongly recommend that you don't get rid of that. Don't go ahead and manually extra edit your recordings. I think the background noise that is there in some of these recordings are crucial information. For example, the background noise from the Western Ghats for a great hornbill is going to be very different from background noise for a great hornbill in North or Central India, for example. And I think that's very useful, and I'm telling you this from a conservation and research standpoint. From your recording standpoint, sometimes, yes, there's a lot more background noise. It's a little, it might be a little difficult to hear it, but this is important information that I think you should keep. Besides trimming, I would say don't do excessive editing to the audio. Yeah, a question about normalizing the call. I mentioned this briefly. I would not worry too much about normalizing at the moment, because in 2 weeks from now, Merlin's Macaulay Library is releasing a new update where they are going to do the automated process of normalizing. All you need to do is trimming, and they'll take care of the normalizing once it's on Macaulay Library. Is there a way to amplify a pre-recorded sound? Good question. Not necessarily. When you are on your, when you're processing it, there are ways to potentially amplify the volume, etc. But the gain remains the same. Sometimes you can increase the gain a little bit, but it artificially changes the way the sound is perceived. I would say that often, when the normalization process occurs, that is the way the amplification happens. So to the question that Ramesh asked before, he was talking about normalization, where what you're trying to do is you're trying to amplify the source signal as much as you can. So that's the process of normalization. And many of these softwares like Ocean Audio, Audacity helps you normalize it. One way for you to amplify it is to do this process of normalizing. But like I said earlier, you don't need to deal with that anymore, because Macaulay Library is going to do it as soon as you upload it. Right, let's see. With respect to ML training, how do you handle noise to signal ratio? Again, I think, like I said, again, keep the background noise. It's important for us to get different variation of noises from different parts of the country, because that is helpful for the model. Can the recording be? Yes, the recording will be made available to everyone through the BirdCount India YouTube channel, I believe. Merlin fails to ID wobbler. Yes, I agree, Yogan. That is a problem. Definitely, I think it's like I said, when you use Merlin right now, right, it still tells you that it's able to identify up to 50 to 60% with a certain level of accuracy. What this means is that I think two things. One, there's a tremendous opportunity for all of us to contribute more data to help improve the model. But at the moment, I don't believe there is any other app like Merlin Sound ID for birds that can recognize bird sounds specifically and provides you a free field guide, etc. So, um, um, yeah, hi from the Philippines. Advice on acoustics for urban biodiversity. I'm happy to chat more about this. This is a detailed answer, so please email me, and I'm happy to tell you a bit more about how we carry out research for urban wildlife versus more rural, semi-urban wildlife. Yes, Sachin, great question. Yes, you can record using your phone recorder using Merlin itself. Yes, that's absolutely right. We didn't talk about it, but when you use the Merlin Sound ID button, you can press that button and record it, and then you can keep that recording, save that recording, and when you go home, you're able to download that recording and do the same process of editing as I was talking about. Yeah, we spoke a bit about BirdNet, so I'm happy to chat a bit more if you want to email me about how we use BirdNet in our research. We've been testing different ways of how effective it is. It's very, very useful for researchers and conservationists who want to understand how to process, say, 3,000 days of audio, right? Like in one go. This is where like models like BirdNet is super useful. Where to buy a parabola? Again, like I think these are great questions, Parmil. I think the India Ecoacoustics Network, we have like a running WhatsApp group where you can ask questions about hardware. People quickly answer that. I don't know off the top of my head what might be good dealers in India to buy this, but please ask these questions there. Rishikesh, apply for grants for equipment needed for a project. Yeah, so this is a good question. I think it really depends on what sort of project it is. So it's a bit more of a nuanced question. I think assuming that you're a researcher who's just starting off, the Idea Wild program is a good one for equipment alone. They give you grants just for equipment. It's about a limited amount of money, but just to buy equipment. The Rufford grant is also great if your project has more of a conservation focus. And online, I'm sure you'll find a lot more granting agency options. If you have more questions, please reach out to me. I'm happy to answer them separately. Taran, your question, do we upload audio to eBird only or to Macaulay Library? No. So you're uploading only via eBird. That automatically goes to Macaulay Library. So you don't need to worry about uploading the audio separately to Macaulay Library. At the moment, there's no option for us to upload it directly to Macaulay as well. So your only option is record the calls using eBird and then upload it through your eBird checklist using your browser. Yeah, I'm just seeing if there are any other questions that are being asked. Is there a noise cancellation app? Like I answered, I think I would recommend staying away from it because this data is valuable. But there are, of course, plenty of noise cancellation apps. I don't know off the top of my head which ones are better than the others. But that being said, many things like Audacity and Ocean Audio have their normalization sometimes helps you remove some of that. But if there's a lot of noise in the background, it still doesn't do a good job after normalization. So I would try to leave it as it is if your target signal is still there. Yes, great question. When we're in a forest and there are multiple species giving calls, which species do we add the recording against in our checklist? Well, I think this is, so I would say when you do your eBird checklist, you're trying to report all the species that you can confidently determine that you can hear and see. But the recordings, you should put it just for the species that you've recorded audio for. So when you go to the eBird website and when you click the manage media, it gives you an option to actually record audio species by species. So you don't need to worry about it being uploaded for multiple species at once. I think your latter question sometimes is that I understand what you're saying. Sometimes you have a soundscape recording, right? You have 10 species, but you have not isolated it. Now, I think the checklist media option in Merlin allows you to upload the entire soundscape itself. So if you're not able to isolate the specific calls, you can upload that itself directly, and that's counted as the media for that entire checklist. Ethan asked, Merlin doesn't. Actually, Ethan, you don't need your network to use Merlin in any of those locations. You don't need a phone network. As long as you've downloaded the Merlin app on your phone, and you've used included your latest update, you should be fine. If you've had trouble in the past, it could be a potential update. But as far as I'm aware, you don't need network to use Merlin. Yes, I think we answered Mithil's answered your question as well, Nachiket. Yeah, I think that's about it. We've covered all the questions. If there are more questions, again, please reach out to any of us via email. Happy to answer any of them. Yeah, Keerthi, last question. Yes, trim the audio if you can before uploading. I would say try not to upload raw recordings without any editing, because then you're uploading background noise where the signal is not there at all. I wouldn't say it's useless, but it's not useful data for research. So yeah, I would recommend definitely editing it a little bit. And also, trust me, the trimming process is actually really fun. You're listening to the audio and you're trimming it in real time, and then you listen to it. It's actually really nice. Anyway, I think we're definitely out of time now. I've
Yes.
taken a lot more time, so I'll stop answering
No
questions.
worries, but I'm glad you were able to answer questions so patiently, and thanks to the audience also who have been enthusiastic about asking questions and very interesting questions. Thanks a lot, everyone. We will soon make this recording available on our YouTube channel. But thanks everyone, and Vijay is going to have another webinar, which is part two, continuation of this webinar. So it will be sometime. We haven't decided it, but it will be sometime after GBBC. So we will keep sharing updates on our Instagram and also on our WhatsApp group. So thanks everyone, and have a great weekend. And I hope we get some bird sound recordings from you this weekend. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks, Vijay.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, thanks, Mithil.